So just, I'm going to be talking about these national coral reef assessments now, following on from what David's just presented on the red list of ecosystems, and it follows closely from what the question Jared asked about incorporating local scale issues to provide new answers for decision makers. I'll go through the background of this assessment and followed by the objectives of the National Coral Reef Assessment, the main steps in the process, possible outcomes from this kind of an assessment, and how to move forward collaboratively. So the national context in Kenya, so coral reefs are globally and also nationally flagship ecosystems for conservation and sustainable development, as well as one of the in kind of visual indicators for climate change when it comes to coral bleaching. Kenya does have a strong focus politically on development, the blue economy, or I should say the sustainable blue economy, let me not forget the sustainable, and eradicating food insecurity. And coral reefs provide services which contribute to all of those. And so in that context, coral reefs are probably more important ever for Kenya. However, we now know that reefs in Kenya are vulnerable to collapse from the red list of ecosystems assessment. And along with them, do collapse would go all the benefits that we derive from them. There's also a lot happening on our coast at the moment, which involves coral reefs in some way. There's activities that can damage reefs. There's activities that are there to conserve reefs, and there's activities that support livelihoods and generate revenue. In addition to the national level factors, there are also some international factors to consider. There are a number of international agreements that Kenya is a part of, which requires Kenya to meet certain targets, such as increasing the area under protection, selecting certain sites for conservation and sustainable use options as well. However, the context for all of this is that Kenya, as with most countries, has scarce or limited resources. We simply can't afford to manage everything. Therefore, in order to be successful, we must aim to be strategic about what we choose to do, where do we do this, and why do we do that. So site selection becomes very important. And then the question becomes, on what basis should we prioritize our actions at different sites? That's where the National Coral Reef Assessments come in. The assessments will assess reefs across Kenya to help prioritize areas to target effective management actions that can support reef and community resilience. Objectives are to develop a needs-based assessment to feed into policy frameworks, identify most suitable areas for planned management interventions, and identify new areas which require management interventions. The assessment will build on from the Western Indian Ocean Coral Reef, RLE. So whilst it might not employ the same framework, it will utilize some of the data and indicators that we used for some. It'll be undertaken at a high spatial resolution, so ideally at site level. It'll consider various aspects, including socioeconomic aspects, so it's not just, so decision makers aren't just making decisions purely based on ecological information. Assessment will started this year and we plan to run it for about a year. It'll be quantitative or data-based assessment. And it'll be participatory and flexible. Participatory meaning as is the intention with this workshop, engage stakeholders at various times so that the assessment is more co-developed rather than just CORDIO developed. And we want to design an approach that's flexible and works for Kenya. Plans to do similar assessments in Mozambique and Tanzania as well. The main steps, there's five main steps. First, identify decision support information needs and processes. Then it's to assess the sites. the resilience of sites and other sorts of sites, prioritize which sites require conservation and management, assess the stated threat levels at these sites, and identify suitable management actions at these sites. So the first phase is scoping, and it's scoping on policy, management, resource uses, and projects and plans that are already in place. The, the group discussions in this particular meeting will help us in that first of this phase. So about finding out what policy frameworks exist or need to be updated, and how can we design our assessment to achieve this and to feed into these policy frameworks. So the idea is to focus the assessment on the correct things and provide the required information. So what's important for Kenya now, and how can we provide the right information for those? An example of this could be an example of relevant process could be marine spatial planning, for which I know Kenya has some interest in undertaking. Assess the relative resilience of sites. And it's really, this is the main analytical aspects, and it's about undertaking the analysis. So once we understand the policy frameworks or the policy requirements of the assessment, we can design the assessment to answer those. Again, this will be at a site-based, a local scale, which is at a manageable scale. And it will involve sites being assessed using similar methods and similar data, so comparisons can be made across in order to identify which ones may be better suited or of greater importance. The third step is to prioritize the sites for conservation and management. So identifying critical reef areas. This could be based on their ecological integrity, their resilience, or on their value, the economic value, their cultural value, or diversity value as well. So through this, some of the things that might be able to, we may be able to identify are areas of importance as high connectivity reefs, areas with high socioeconomic value, reefs in the best condition, areas with a high biodiversity value, reefs that are likely to survive heating and bleaching exposure, or key biodiversity areas. I will great detail on KBAs, as in the next presentation, Paul will introduce those. The fourth step was obviously identifying risks, and as Jared mentioned, that includes upstream things. There are numerous threats that can affect coral reefs in Kenya, and their ability of reefs to provide the important services humans depend on. And it's important to consider the level and effect of these different the various sites. So threats like pollution, runoff, tourism and physical impact, overfishing, coral disease, and others. This may be constrained by data availability, but again, we could work out ways to incorporate proxy data and other forms of data. The final step is, now that we know the important areas and the issues, it's really about thinking what needs to be done at the sites. Do we need to manage threats or maintain or restore reef health? This is an interesting step because we see the potential for a structured process which involves a range of stakeholders to come to these decisions. And it's at this stage when we're considering management measures, not to just consider coral reef issues, but also non-coral benefits that management measures can provide, including alternative livelihood options, promoting social resilience, and protection of other ecosystems. To try and ground some of that abstract methodology, some of the possible outcomes could be degraded areas, most suitable for, so this is what we could find from the assessment. Degraded areas most suitable for assisted coral restoration, degraded areas likely to recover naturally requiring just protection or threat mitigation, areas most suitable for local community management, areas suitable for no-take areas, no fishing areas, other fishing management measures, potential livelihood activities, priority areas for MPAs, and potentially even coral reef key biodiversity areas. The map is just for illustrative purposes to show how it may be assessed and measured based on how well they fare based on certain criteria. And finally, just to make the point clear about how we see this work as more than just a project, a CORDIO project, or this is very much a collaborative initiative, and we want to build it as such. And at different stages, we see the opportunity for this to be collaborative and involve different stakeholder groups. And certainly, with the right level of involvement, we can meet the desired objectives and outcomes. And some of the collaboration can be through data sharing and data contributions, which was how we worked on the Red List of Ecosystems. Assessment can be through analytical contributions and research contributions, policy and planning engagements, community level engagement and outreach, interpretation of some of the results and formulating recommendations based on those, and certainly dissemination of results and integration into policy. So numerous ways that members who have joined, participants who have joined this event, as well as others, can be part of this process. Yeah, so that's all I have to present today on this. Thank you for your attention.